Hello friends and welcome. This is episode 5 of Journey into Fandom, a podcast where I have guests on to discuss what fandoms and communities they're part of, what their experience has been, what the memes are, and how toxic or wholesome it is. I'm your host, Cara Salon, and today on the show we have Justin and Hallie from the Quiz and Hers podcast on to talk about the trivia community. They talked about how they got into quizzing and trivia, which game shows they enjoy, and the overall wholesomeness of the fandom unless you're caught cheating. Now, without any further ado, please join me on this journey into fandom. Everybody, and welcome to another episode of Journey into Fandom. My name is Karis, and today on the show we have Justin and Hallie Landy of the Quiz and Hers podcast. So, welcome.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi. So, I did listen to your 101 episode.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and I was really pleased because I knew 2 of the answers. I knew Alicia Keys and I guessed darts. I was like, it's got to be that, right?
Yeah.
It was either gonna be darts or like snooker. So I was pretty chuffed because I'm terrible at like general knowledge. So this is going to be so exciting. This is going to be a really fun episode. So you guys do your podcast and it's all to do with trivia, so that's fun.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about it? About how you started it and things like that, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So, we started it when Hallie turned to me one day and said, we should do a podcast.
But it wasn't just, we should do any podcast. I had this random idea that, we should do a trivia podcast where we quiz each other. And so, I don't know, it just came out of nowhere. And I guess I thought of the name, too.
You did.
Which is Quiz and Hers. And then
great.
You kind of ran with it.
Yeah.
I was like, this would be fun. Whatever. And you were like, let's do it.
Yep. I'm always, I always like to have a project to work on. So, yeah.
It's so fun. Yeah. So on this show, we talk about fandoms and like communities. So I know nothing about like the trivia fandom. I didn't even really know that was a thing. Like, I mean, I've been to like a couple pub quizzes in my life and been horrible at them. But yeah, so this is so interesting. So I want to know like everything. So like how did you guys get into learning trivia and I guess doing your show as an extension of that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been doing this kind of thing for as long as I can remember. When I was a kid in school, the only thing I was ever any good at was school. Like, I couldn't play sports. I had no athletic aptitude, and that hasn't changed. I played an instrument in the school band, but I was never very good at it. I was super socially awkward. The only thing I was good at was, like, learning stuff, and so I liked learning stuff. So I've been doing this, like, this type of thing for as long as I can remember.
So you did like official trivia quiz bowl, they called it in high school.
Yep, I was on my high school's trivia team, and we traveled around and competed against other schools. That was fun.
I wanted to, but it interfered with tennis because I did have some other things besides school going on.
Yeah, not me.
Nice. That's cool.
But yeah, you've always been into Jeopardy and all that, and I know you want to go on Jeopardy someday.
One day, yes. So I mean, that's how I got into it. And then you've always sort of been into this stuff as well. Probably not as much as me until we met, but
yeah, but I always thought it was fun too.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I always think it's fascinating, like meeting people that just know so much about just random things. I'm like, I would never even think to like research this thing. So like, that's a great question. It's like, how do you learn so much random stuff? Like, is it just a case of you watch the news or whatever and you're like remember certain factors that like, this is interesting to me, I'm gonna go and read about this for a day? Like, I'm just so interested.
I mean, I think even before we started the podcast, you were always just reading about stuff that you heard about.
Yeah, I mean, I would just fall down Wikipedia holes constantly, and now I'm doing it with something of a purpose for researching for the podcast. But like, I would just read up on stuff that I thought was weird and interesting. You also learn a lot just by doing trivia, like watching game shows and stuff. There's certain things that just come up a lot that you end up learning without really even meaning to.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not always like knowing a lot about a subject or details. Sometimes it's just knowing these certain facts that come up a lot, which I know seems kind of lame because it's like you're not actually knowing a lot about it. You just know this one fact about it, and that's all you need to know.
Exactly, yeah. Like, I know absolutely nothing about, John Adams, except that he was the second president of the United States, and that's all you need to know to be able to fake your way through a trivia question about him. So, like, it's not about knowing all that much, actually. It's about knowing a little bit, the right little bit about almost everything. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Interesting.
And I think it's also based on, like, our specific interests. Like, I'm definitely more interested in, like, movies and pop culture and musicals and that stuff. So I definitely know more details about it, whereas you know more details about history. And I just try to know what I have to know because I'm not a history person.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And like, I think sometimes, like, because the very few times that I've been to like a pub quiz, like I remember one of the questions was, obviously everybody in the US would know this, but we're in the UK, so it was like, how old do you have to be the president? I was like, I'm pretty sure it's 35, and then everyone else was like, no, I think it's 40, and I was like, no, I've got a feeling it's 35, but like everybody went with the majority answer, and I was like, if I'd have been like insistent about it, and been like, no, I know this for sure, like we would have got it right.
So, I don't think all Americans know that. Honestly.
No, I don't think most Americans could pass a basic civics class, honestly. But
I don't think so.
I mean, you've seen the news, so
right.
But yeah, so like that's sort of what I'm talking about. Like that's something that any trivia person would know, that you have to be 35 to be president. But like, I really couldn't tell you anything about why that was the number that they picked when they drafted the Constitution. I don't know any of the history behind that. I have no idea.
It would be interesting to read up on, but there's just so much.
Right, exactly.
That's why for our podcast, we try to do like a little bit of research and give like a summary of the topic so that we can know a little bit more, but you can only go so deep into it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. It was really interesting to listen to, actually, to like hear some of the background of like the different questions that you asked. And, I really enjoyed the one where you were talking about like the tallest building and how like there's different ways to measure that. And I guess I'd never really thought about that. I'm just like, oh, the tallest building is the tallest building. It's like, yeah, but how do you quantify that?
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing the research for that one. Although the upshot is it doesn't matter how you measure it right now because it's Burj Khalifa no matter what, because it's just so much bigger than anything else in the world. But yeah,
right.
But it used to matter before they built that building.
Yeah. Well, this is great, and I've learned so much. So now if someone asks me, what's the tallest building, I will know the answer. So thank you.
You're welcome. That's the whole idea of the podcast.
We'll have
exactly.
to go to more pub trivia now.
Yeah, definitely.
I will, yes. And if that comes up, like, yeah. And I think it's so weird because I went to a pub quiz actually at the start of the year. One of the questions was to do with what was like the one song that came out, or no, it was like the single was called Dynamite, and what was the band like that released it, and it had however many like millions of like plays in 24 hours. And so I was thinking about this, and I was like, well, it can't be any Western group because it just can't be. So I was like, it's got to be BTS, right? And it was, and I've never listened to BTS in my life.
No, me neither.
Just by like process of like deduction.
Yes.
And the fact that it's got to be an international band with a huge following throughout the West and also in like Asia. Yeah. And I just was like, well, that's an educated guess. And it was right. And I was like, oh, and I felt so smart.
So that's very, I mean, that's very good logic. And I think the best trivia questions let you do that. They give you a way to try to puzzle it out. Not all of them are that good, but I think the best ones are.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great question. Yeah, so like how do you come up with like the trivia questions when you're thinking about that for your show?
I mean, I guess
I
there's a few
basically do
ways.
I basically do mine the same way.
Okay.
I have like a similar way of constructing questions.
All right, how do you do it? Because I do it a few
like.
different ways.
Like I try to do like the main part that connects to because we do like one overall theme. So it obviously has to connect back to the theme. So I think of the way that it connects to the theme, and then I think of another way in, like another good fact that's like not too easy, not too hard, that I can tie in about the person. I think if we weren't
not
tied
always
to,
a person, but
to the answer.
You do too many questions about people.
People are a lot. People are important. But what was I saying?
Yeah, you try to find a second way in. Yeah,
if we weren't tied to this one theme, everything having to connect to a theme, our questions could be more nuanced, but it kind of holds us back a little bit.
Well, and I think also having the theme, like, it forces us to narrow in on things, right?
Yes.
Like, we can't just be freewheeling and asking questions about literally anything in the world.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it does affect the question.
Oh, it absolutely does, yeah. So, I mean, I have like a running list of stuff that I want to get around to asking and talking about on the podcast. And so I sometimes will start there. I'll just say, okay, like, let me try to find a link between 2 or 3 of these things and then build out the game from there. Yeah, I agree with Hallie that, like, I think the best questions are the ones that give you multiple ways of getting at the answer, but that are not like too easy about it. Like, you know, you can sort of come at it in a couple of different directions. And certainly not all of the questions we write end up being like that, but I think the best ones are.
Yeah. There's a thing in the fandom called Yekioid, which is an acronym for you either know it or you don't, which is the worst type of question, we think, because you either know it or you don't. The best type of question is you can somehow figure it out. Right.
And even if you don't figure it out, if you can look back at the question and see how you could have, it's a good question. But the Yekioid questions, none of us like those. The ones where it's just like, you got to either have this piece of knowledge in your brain or not. Those are not interesting.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So that thing about Yekioid.
Yeah.
Is that universally a bad thing in the fandom, or like do people universally not enjoy those kinds of questions, or is that just you guys personally don't like those?
I think it's pretty universal.
I agree.
We see so we're in addition to the podcast, we also compete in like an online trivia league that we play in, and there's like, Facebook groups around it that people discuss the questions after the games are over, and there's an awful lot of complaining about Yekioid questions when they come up. So yeah, I think that's pretty universally considered to be like kind of the laziest way you can write a question.
Right. And I think for like an easy topic, it's not that big a deal if most people know it. But if it's like, most people don't know it, then it's, you should give people another way to figure it out.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So in terms of the fandom, is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of how you interact personally, like with the fandom, and then we can move on to like the discourse kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's mostly online. We do go to pub trivia. Well, we've not so much lately because the pandemic is destroying everything. But but pre-pandemic, we went to pub trivia a lot. And we would play with our friends, and we went to it's not really like conventions or anything, but we did go to like a sort of, I'm not really sure how you describe it. It was just a really big trivia event, I guess. We were asked to join a team by someone who listens to the podcast, who's putting a team together for this, like, there must have been 20 or 25 teams of 8 people competing. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest thing we did.
Yeah, but mostly it's online. People who play in online leagues with each other, or just our fans. They just kind of talk about questions, and there's a big like Jeopardy community on Twitter that everybody dissects every question from Jeopardy on Twitter. There's a lot of that. So yeah,
awesome. Yeah, it's awesome to hear that there are these kind of events that people just go and do quizzing. Like, that's awesome. I've never really met people that are into that, so that's so fun.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from local people that will just go to pub quizzes, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's like a huge one called, what is it called? Geek Bowl. That's like a national thing in the U.S., but we haven't gotten to go, but maybe someday.
Yeah, it's like...
It's a huge convention.
It's held in like Las Vegas, I think, right?
I thought Chicago.
Oh, is it Chicago?
I don't know. Maybe different places.
Maybe it moves around, but yeah, we've never gone to that, but we'd like to at some point. We just gotta, we gotta find a time we can do it. So
yeah,
absolutely. All right. So, in terms of the fandom discourse, so you mentioned this topic. You were like, "Oh, we need to talk about this." The controversy to do with the new host of Jeopardy. I haven't read about this at all. So would you be able to explain the situation that's going on? And anything else you want to chat about?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Is Jeopardy not really watched by anyone?
I don't think they have it in the UK.
There's no way to watch it.
We
right?
talked to Rory about this once when we were on his podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen it in my life. I do know that people talk about it a lot on Twitter and things like that.
Right.
I'm kind of aware of that, but I've never actually seen an episode. I don't even know what...
It's sad that...
It's hard to imagine for me as an American because it is such an institution here. Like, even people who don't watch it know what it is, and they will say like, "Oh, you didn't answer in the form of a question." Like, they'll make those dumb jokes about it all the time because like it's just so ubiquitous.
But it's also extremely difficult to watch. Even here, if you don't want to have cable, or there's just no way to watch it unless you have cable and you watch it at that time, or you can DVR it on your cable, but it's not anywhere else.
Right. It's not. It doesn't.
Pay to watch
it's
it.
not on streaming anywhere, which is really frustrating sometimes. But because I would pay $5 a month just to be able to watch every old episode of Jeopardy. I would do that forever, but you can't. So,
it sucks.
It
is
does.
it like? Can you get it on YouTube at all or anything like that?
Probably some of the older ones. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. I should have done this as homework, but I've not had time. I will look this up afterwards. I'll just try and see if I can track it down. Yeah.
But yeah, so should we talk about Mike Richards though?
Okay, go ahead.
All right.
Yes.
Do you want to tell him? Do you want to say what happened, or should I?
Well, I think we should preface it by saying, for people who don't watch Jeopardy, that Alex Trebek was the host of Jeopardy for 35 years.
Yep.
Wow.
But then he passed away from pancreatic cancers, and it was kind of sudden. Even though everybody knew he was sick, they didn't really know that he was like that sick. I don't think he was.
Right.
I don't think he really gave people much of a warning.
He had recorded a block of episodes of the show like 2 weeks before he died. Like he was still working. He was still. It's crazy.
So they
That's so sad.
Yeah,
so sad. I mean, everybody's just still mourning that in the community. So
yeah, and so they had a series of like guest hosts because they didn't want to appoint a new host right away. Partly because they needed time to find one, and partly just out of respect for him. So they had a bunch of guest hosts who would host for like a week or two at a time. And in some cases, the guest hosts were just like, this is kind of cool. Like, I'll do this, because I like Jeopardy and I liked Alex Trebek. For others, it was very clearly like they were auditioning for the permanent position.
Right.
But one of the first guest hosts, so the very first one was Ken Jennings, who you may be familiar with, the guy who holds the record for the most wins on Jeopardy. He won like 74 games in a row or something. It's insane.
I feel like he's like a trivia guy that people would know.
He's absolutely the face of like the trivia community right now.
Cool.
So he hosted it for I think 6 weeks. Because he was sort of the contingency plan. If anything did happen to Alex, he was the one they were going to have step in and guest host. So they knew that was going to happen. But then they had like a 2-week gap in between Ken hosting and when the first of the official like celebrity guest hosts.
Or that's what they said.
Well, that's what they say.
Know.
And we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So the person who hosted in those 2 weeks was Mike Richards, who is the executive producer of the show. And the way he spun it at the time was, I don't want this job. I don't want to replace Alex Trebek, but the show must go on. And as the executive producer, I'm going to step up and do this.
Like he literally said that at the beginning of the episode.
Right. Okay. So then we fast forward to, I guess, a couple weeks ago now.
Yeah, this all happened around December.
Ago. Yeah. This was late last year.
Okay.
So now we fast forward to just a couple weeks ago.
We've run through a lot of guest hosts.
We've had
some good, some bad.
Yeah. So we've had, probably 20 guest hosts at this point. Mike Richards is announced as the new permanent host of Jeopardy.
Right. with Mayim Bialik, who you may know from like Big Bang Theory and Blossom.
Okay.
She got the job of doing like the tournaments and the, what did they call it?
The prime time.
He does
specials,
syndicated.
right.
She does prime
so
time.
he's going to do like the daily edition, and she's going to host like special episodes, essentially. Okay. So this is the announcement made. There is an immediate uproar on Trivia Twitter because the optics of it are he basically hired himself, right? He's the executive producer, and I'm sure, there were lots of other people involved in the hiring process, but ultimately it's his show and he's running it, and he just put himself behind the podium that Alex Trebek was behind for 35 years. So people immediately are angry about this, and by people I mean me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hate this.
No one was happy.
No one was happy about this. And here's the thing, too. He wasn't that, like, he was a pretty decent guest host. Like, he did a pretty good job running the show. I didn't mind him during those 2 weeks, but the fact that he basically hired himself just rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at least if he'd been open about it in the beginning and said, I'm interested in this job and I'm doing it, probably it would have been less upsetting than pretending that they were auditioning these other people, but he didn't want it anyway. It was weird.
And it raises so many questions about, like, what was the process here behind the scenes? Like, he's the executive producer. He's the one deciding which episodes from each guest host to give to focus groups, right? So, like, he's running the process. It just casts such a shadow over this whole search for the new host. Like, was the fix in from the very beginning? Did any of this even mean anything? Or was he always going to hire himself? Like, we don't know.
Yeah.
So then
this
you want to
tell the craziest
you want to tell
part.
the next thing to happen, because you've read a bit more about this than I have.
So how many days after? Do you know the exact number?
It was less than a week.
So it was less than a week. So roughly, I would say it was days. I don't know. Later, all of a sudden there's an announcement that he's stepping down as the host of Jeopardy because of some sexist and racist comments that he made, actually mainly on a podcast. So there was a previous Jeopardy contestant named Claire, it's either McNear or McNair, who she's a journalist, and she had written a book called Answers in the Form of Questions, A Definitive History and Insider's Guide to Jeopardy. So she was known for that. But then she came out with this article on The Ringer, which I don't know much about. I guess it's just a website.
It's like Vox or whatever. It's one of those.
Yeah. So she released this article on The Ringer that basically called him out for she did all the research and found like all the stuff that he did that was not cool. And so she called him out and they immediately canceled.
He stepped down. Yeah. So
he's canceled.
Yeah, so he's basically canceled for stuff he said back in like 2013 and 2014. And I read some of the comments. They're not great. I'll be honest, like, I've said some stuff 10 years ago that I wouldn't want to be judged for today. So, like, I'm
and they argue that Ken Jennings didn't get the job because of one tweet that he made.
Well, it's more than one, but
so a few tweets that he made over 10 years ago. So it's like almost it puts it into perspective that like almost all of these people probably have at one point said or tweeted something,
some skeleton in their
closet, which is
closet.
kind of crazy to think about.
It is. So like, I'm not thrilled that the reason he stepped down was because of something he did 8 years ago. But on the other hand, and like, it's not like he was using racial slurs or anything. I mean, like I said, the comments are not great. I'm not going to repeat them here, but it wasn't like, he wasn't spouting like white supremacist stuff or anything like that. Like, it didn't come close to that level. So, I'm not super happy that that's what ended up happening with him. However, I am happy with the result, which is that now he's not going to be the host, because I think that would have been just a terrible direction for the show to go, that he, it would have been so self-aggrandizing for him to be the host of the show that he's been the showrunner on.
And Alex was always known for being so humble, and I don't know, it just kind of ruins the whole image of the show. So now Mayim Bialik is going to be guest hosting again for a couple weeks while they figure it out. And I think a lot of people, including myself, are hoping they just keep her and be done with it, because it's it's kind of becoming exhausting.
Yeah, so she was
not worried, but just like following all this news it's like enough already.
Yeah, so she was definitely one of the finalists, they said, as was Ken. I'm hearing rumors that it might be Ken's job to lose now again, which
That would be fine.
I've been saying from the beginning he's the only person who should be taking over because he's, like I said, he's the face of the trivia community right now. And
he was very good, and I think
he did a great job.
I think if Mike Richards truly had not wanted the job, he would have given it to Ken
exactly.
in the first place.
I agree, exactly. And, he became close friends with Alex Trebek. Like, he knew him personally, and he narrated the audiobook of Alex's memoirs. Like, I think he's the clear choice in my mind. Yeah. Although I do think Mayim Bialik would be great. She was very, very good.
Yeah, but she does have a lot going on. I mean, she's like running her own sitcom now. I think she's actually...
Is she the producer on that as well?
I think so. Yeah, and then she also has a pretty big podcast, and like she just has a lot going on too. So I don't know if she wants
if she would have the time in her schedule to do it. But she would be great. Ken would be great. But yeah, there's going to be sounds like another series of guest hosts now until they sort it out. And I guess maybe this time they'll vet the person's old tweets and podcasts before they announce it. So
hopefully, yeah. And I think it's such a huge thing actually is who is the host of the show, because like in some ways, like, oh, it doesn't matter, like, it's interchangeable, but I think like it's actually really integral because I mean, I don't watch that many quiz shows, but I do actually when I'm at my nan's house, because she watches a lot of daytime TV. And so I've got to know, we have this thing in the UK called Tipping Point. And
I've heard of it.
I don't know.
I've never seen it, but I've heard of it.
It's like a weird like slot machine thing where you get like gold coins that come down like if you get a question right, and then it like pushes the coins down, and then like the more that you get, like the more like money you win and whatever. Okay. But anyway, the host of that is called Ben Shepherd, and he is just so nice. He's great. He's like a gem. We love him. And then the host of the presenter on The Chase is this man called Bradley Walsh, and he's so nice as well. And I just feel like it wouldn't be the same without them.
It absolutely wouldn't. Yeah.
So yeah, I understand that it's big shoes to fill.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And,
on Jeopardy.
To my mind, it's not even just the personality. Like, obviously, that's definitely important, like you're saying, but there's also just a certain kind of, rhythm that some of them have that others didn't among the guest hosts. Like some of the guest hosts of Jeopardy, they just ran the game really fluidly.
It's like a fast game, so you have to like keep the flow going, and sometimes it feels like it's not flowing right, which is
right. And it's hard to put your finger on exactly what that means, but you can definitely feel it. Like when the host is not running the game at the right pace with the right rhythm, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's cool. I do hope that they get the right person. Yeah.
It's just so crazy that this is just like in the US and you guys can't even watch.
Yeah.
I know, it's really strange.
Yeah.
So that'll have to be my homework. I'll have to look up Jeopardy and find out what's going on and see if I can find an episode. Yeah. So I actually have a frame of reference. That's awesome, though.
We'll have to try to find Tipping Point on YouTube.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. It sounds
Tipping
fun,
Point
though.
is good. It is good. I mean, I think that Tipping Point is interesting to watch for people like me who aren't super good at trivia, because the questions tend to be like pretty guessable and like quite, I don't want to say easy, but yeah, like I think if I was on Tipping Point, I would do a much better job there than if I was on something like The Chase, which is really difficult.
Yeah, we have The Chase here too. There's an American version of it. It's great. I love The Chase.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah. So, what is your favorite game show? Do you have one at all, or do you? How many do you watch? Do you kind of watch all of them, or?
Yeah, so we watch pretty much all the trivia ones. So the main ones here, Jeopardy is, I think, everyone's favorite in the U.S. Probably, just because again, it's such an institution. It's been around. It's older than we are. So literally, like, it's been on since before either of us were born. So it's crazy. So yeah, so there's Jeopardy. We watch The Chase. There's a new one called College Bowl, which is like teams of students from different colleges competing in a trivia tournament, which is quite fun. Universities, yeah, colleges, universities.
Yeah.
That one's quite fun. It's hosted by, you may not know this name, Peyton Manning, who's a former American football quarterback, one of the greatest of all time.
Awesome.
So that's kind of fun.
Yeah. I feel like since this whole thing with Alex Trebek passing away, like trivia has just become more popular all of a sudden.
It definitely has. Well, because it's brought so much more attention to this kind of weird niche hobby that we have, like yeah, you're right. The chase happened, I guess it was in production before he died, but it came out after he died.
Yeah.
So, and
they have as what do they call them? Chasers.
The chasers,
like the 3 best Jeopardy contestants. Like that's where they came from.
Yeah. The 3 greatest contestants in the history of Jeopardy are the chasers, and then we also have Mark the Beast
that's
Labette.
Interesting.
He's on it as well.
Yeah.
Who he's great. He's awesome. But yeah. So yeah, I think we pretty much watch all the quiz type shows that we can find.
Do you find any of them like harder than others in terms of the kinds of questions that they like? Like, is there one that you're like, oh, I can always guarantee that they'll have good questions on there?
I think the difference with the chase is that a lot of their questions are what we were saying earlier, yekioid, like you either know it or you don't.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they have a little bit of like you can logic them out, and it's interesting to see the chasers seem to be better at figuring out how to logic them out, and they'll explain how they figured it out, which is so cool. But for me, it's definitely harder.
Yeah, I find the chase pretty hard. I particularly find the chaser round hard and very yekioid. Like, the one where you have the multiple choices and the chaser is chasing you down the board. I find those be quite difficult, those questions. The cash builder and the final chase questions I don't find as difficult, but yeah, I find the chase around questions very hard. But I guess it's because you have a 1 in 3 chance, so they can't make it too easy, right?
Yeah, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Some of those questions are, in the beginning at least, they're just like super easy.
They get tough by the end, though.
Right.
Yeah. That's not on anymore, I don't think, is it?
Well, it was running with Jimmy Kimmel.
Oh, that's right. They had that. Yeah. That's right. I forgot about that. But it hasn't come back yet, I don't think.
And we also had The Weakest Link.
Oh, yeah. They brought back Weakest Link last year. That's right. I totally forgot about that.
Interesting. Yeah, we had that years ago.
Yeah, Jane Lynch hosted, doing the worst Anne Robinson impression you can imagine.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was not good.
But I still like that show. It's fun.
I like the format of that show. Boy, the people they get on there are not trivia types, though.
No.
Like, a lot of them are really terrible.
That's the point.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not a huge Weakest Link fan. I mean, I enjoy it. I'll watch it, but like, I think it's much more, I don't know, it feels more like glitzy reality show than quiz show in a lot of ways. Like, because it's just you get 8 weird people in a room and have them like, go at each other's throats and make fun of each other, and then there's also some trivia questions in there. So
I think it's fun. It's different.
It's different. Yeah, it's fun, but I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So, is there any other like trivia fandom discourse that's going on right now? And I mean, you mentioned the fact that trivia is becoming more popular as of recently. Like, would you say the wider fandom is reacting well to that, or is there sort of like gatekeeping going on at all? Or
that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the online trivia league that we're in recently had to put a cap on the number of people, but that's not because they're trying to prevent more people from getting in. It's just becoming too much for the people in charge.
Right.
I think it's one person.
It's literally run by one guy in Seattle.
So now there's like a wait list, but I'm assuming a lot more people are trying to get in now with, Jeopardy and all that's going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really small at first, and then when we got in, since we got in, it's just been getting bigger and bigger. So
yeah, we've been doing it for what 2.5 years now.
Yeah,
we've been playing in the league.
That.
So yeah, it's gotten a lot bigger. Sorry, I cut you off. Continue.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like people are very welcoming, except like when there is any hint of cheating, it's immediately like, no, you're done. You're out.
Yes, right. It's a very welcoming community, but it's also a very unforgiving community. If you violate the spirit of the game, then you are a pariah. There's no question about it. But yeah, I mean, I think I've not really seen a lot of gatekeeping. And probably part of that is because it's not the type of fandom where there are like certain content creators that are just sort of considered the leaders or the top of the fandom or whatever, because it is competitive, but it's also just kind of decentralized,
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't
Even
think there's a lot of gatekeeping because there's not really anyone to be keeping the gates, I guess.
Yeah, like even the guy who's in charge of this huge online trivia league, like he has no social media presence whatsoever, right?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I don't think he does. I think he completely stays away from it, and he's just the man behind the scenes. And
right, yeah, exactly. So
yeah,
I don't think there's anybody to do the gatekeeping. Really, I mean, we have our trivia idols, the Ken Jenningses of the world, but like even he doesn't really. I would say he doesn't really steer the fandom at all. He's just kind of the face of it.
I just feel like there's also like not a lot to argue about. Like, I don't know. My thought is like in another fandom, you could be arguing about something, whereas like trivia is like facts. Like that's the whole point of it. So like,
right. It's the last bastion of actual facts mattering.
So it's like, it's like old history and stuff. Like what is there to argue about in terms of like actual content? Whereas other fandoms, the content probably people could have more opinions about it, I guess. Cause
That's a good point.
We're not really here to have opinions. We're just here to like learn.
That's a really good point. You can't get mad about, well, I was going to say you can't get mad about casting, but actually we just talked about how you can. But that's a weird situation. Normally that's not the type of thing that would
It's like
come
the
up.
most interesting thing that's happened in the fandom probably in a long time.
Oh, in years.
Ever,
absolutely. Yeah, there's no question about it.
But yeah, it's just fact.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fun to talk about because, I think a lot of the other people I've spoken to, they'll be like, oh yeah, like there's so much negativity and this, that, and the other, but trivia seems like a very wholesome community, and that's fun.
Yeah, it is. Well,
it definitely is. Yeah.
We were all the nerds getting picked on in high school, and so I think I think that spirit has kind of carried over. That like we try to be welcoming and we try not to be exclusionary. Actually, do you remember, Hallie? So during the off season of this trivia league we play in, like other players can create games for people to play, and it's not like part of the official competition. But do you remember there was the mini league about American history? Was it American? No, it was the movies. It was the 1970s movie one.
Okay.
And people were throwing a fit because all the questions were basically about white men.
Oh no, I missed that.
And people were like, you didn't see this on the Facebook? Oh yeah, no, it was bad. And
it's mostly Facebook that people
communicate on. Yeah. So yeah, they were like, they pointed actually to the American history one as an example of how you can do it right, and you can be representational even on a subject that is primarily about white men in the same way that 70s movies are. But yeah, that
has been a big thing, I think, in the fandom too, and we've been purposely and consciously trying to do that more in our podcast as well, is representation. I guess that's everywhere, so it's definitely in trivia too.
Yeah,
like that's something I would never really think about. I suppose in trivia is like, well, I mean, you've got a whole world of history to ask questions about, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're definitely like America centric in our questions, and I acknowledge that.
Yes. And to a lesser extent Eurocentric, and I think this is something that probably is not changing as fast as it should in the trivia world. Like when you get a history question, 9 times out of 10 it's either American or European. You very rarely get questions about African history or Asian history, occasionally.
But our online trivia league, I think, is pretty good.
Yeah,
he's pretty good about encompassing literally everything. And I think other, people like us who are writing questions are trying to do the same.
I think there's a movement to doing more of that.
Right.
But
it's cool.
The sort of the canonical history stuff is still very white. The stuff that just comes up all the time that everybody needs to know. It's very focused on European and American history, and I think that's something that is changing, but probably not as fast as it should.
Yeah. And would you say that a factor of that would be that a lot of other cultures and histories from, other places just aren't really like taught in school from a young age? And so people just don't know a lot about it in the first place.
I think that is a lot of it. Yeah, if people aren't going to know it, if no one's going to know it, you don't want to ask about it. But then again, if you're not going to ask about it, nobody's going to bother to learn it.
Right.
It's sort of a vicious cycle.
And that's
way.
kind of how we, base our studying or whatever you want to call it is based on the questions they ask on Jeopardy and other quiz shows.
Yeah.
So they need to start asking those questions so people start realizing that it's important, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I think that is happening, just not very quickly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I always tell this story because it's so funny, but when I studied abroad in the US, there's this girl that I met, and she went, "Oh, you're from Scotland?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then 5 minutes later, she went, "Wow, your English is really good."
Oh my
and
God.
I was
Are
like,
you serious?
No, she was dead serious. Like, I didn't. For a split second,
my
I was
God.
like, how do I react to that? So I just kind of laughed in her face. I was like, I don't know what you want me to say. It's like, what?
That's amazing.
It's like, what do they teach? I don't know.
Scary.
But I mean,
Oh my
yeah, it's
God.
like, why would people know about my culture, I guess?
Scotland's been in political union with England for 400 years now.
Yeah.
Come on. My God.
Yeah. It was so funny. It was one of the funniest things that ever happened to me. I was like, I don't even know what to say, girl. Like, who are you?
Can I ask where you were?
I was studying in Maryland.
That's where Justin.
Yeah, I'm from Maryland.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I went to Salisbury University.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I know where that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I grew up a little bit
Yeah.
south of Baltimore.
Very cool. Yeah, so that was wild.
Yeah. My God.
That's nuts. Oh my God.
Yeah, so weird. Have you guys made like friends in the trivia community, like online, or like from conventions or things like that at all?
There's a couple of people like on Twitter and stuff that I interact with regularly who I've never met in person.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, a little bit.
I feel like it's also like brought out like closer friendships with people who we weren't as close with. Who
Yes.
Then this comes up and they want to be in our trivia league, and then kind of like you bond over that.
Yes.
Over like being in this trivia league together. So I think that has come out of it too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I found out about a year ago that my boss is a big trivia fan as well, and I was like, "Oh, really?"
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and so I invited him to join the online league that we play in, and
He's really good.
yeah, he's much better than I am. There's no question about it. But yeah, so I think it's more that like it's something that you find you have in common with people that you might not necessarily expect, and you end up having this thing to talk about and bond over.
And you've become involved in the local high school trivia scene.
That's true. Yeah, so we have a local TV show on it's just like a public access show for local high school teams to compete against each other in trivia. So
like what you did in high
right, the Quiz Bowl stuff that I did in high school. And I've actually recently gotten involved with helping to write the questions and design the games for that, which has been a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah. It seems like every city in the United States has one of these shows that where all the local schools compete. And whenever I move somewhere, I always try to find a local high school quiz show to watch because like I said, I did it in high school, so it's some nostalgia, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. So I've been working on like designing the games for the next season of that, which is really fun.
That's awesome. I don't feel like we have an equivalent to that over here. I mean, I don't remember ever there being like a high school trivia, group or anything like that. I think that, I think it's just something that you kind of learn as an adult. It's, through going to like pub quizzes and stuff.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
As far as I'm aware, I mean, I don't know if like maybe bigger schools across the UK have those, but yeah, it's not something that we have, which is sad. I feel like that would be a fun thing for kids that are maybe more like academically minded that don't want to do sports. That
Yep.
That would be a fun thing to do.
I mean, that's what it was for me in high school. It was I made a lot of friends. I'm not in touch with them anymore 15, 20 years later, whatever it is, but 15, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it was a way for me to meet other kids who were not athletically inclined and who did lean more towards the academics, and it gave us something to do and something to be proud of, and a way to kind of represent the school in competitive contexts. So yeah, it was really fun. I loved it.
Yeah, I think the US goes out in that way just more in general, like even in like high school sports and like college sports and stuff. Like it's a big deal in select universities over here. Like, I mean, the university I went to, Sterling, is like apparently a really big sports school, but did I care? No. Did I go to a single game ever? Like a football game or what have you? No. Like it's just not a thing, really.
Yeah, it's so big here.
Yeah, high school sports and college sports especially they border on religion here for a lot of people.
And we've talked about it on the podcast, which I think is helpful for any international listeners who have no clue. Like, I don't even know all the details of it. It's complicated.
Well, and the big one here, of course, is American football, which you guys don't really even have over in the UK. But I mean, you go to a collegiate football game at one of the big schools. I mean, there will be 100,000 people packed into the stadium. It's insane.
So wild. We do not have such a thing over here at all. I mean, yeah, I went to one American football game. And did not have a clue what was happening. I was like, I don't understand these rules. And people kept trying to explain it to me, and I was like, I don't get it at all. So
that was me for a long time.
When Hallie and I first started dating, now over 10 years ago, I said, I'm a huge football fan. You're going to have to just live with that. You can either learn the game of football and watch with me, or you can go do whatever else you want. But Sundays during football season, that's what I'm going to be doing. And
I did learn it.
You chose to learn the game, and
now I love it. So.
You are perhaps more fanatical about it than I am at this point.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I'm a little crazy about it. We're big fans of the Baltimore Ravens. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun.
Like, I just think it's such a fun culture. Because there's so many different teams. It's like over here, I couldn't care less about local, soccer football teams.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just, I care about England when they're doing okay,
right?
But the thing is like Scottish football fans like hate England with a passion. Like
that makes sense.
They're always rooting for whoever England is playing. Like every time. So I mean, my parents are from the south of England, so I feel like an affinity in that way, but also I just find the Scotland fans insufferable, so I like England. But I feel like if I lived in England, the opposite would be true, and I would be rooting for everywhere else.
Fair enough.
We have our share of insufferable fans.
Oh my god, yes,
a lot. So
that would be a good episode of this podcast, like pro sports fandom.
Yeah,
that's such a good idea. I will have to add that to the list.
If you ever need American football fans, I'm happy to come back.
Yeah, we could always come back again and talk about American pro football. We could talk about the Ravens for hours.
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right.
Are there insufferable trivia fans? Is that a thing that exists?
I feel like on Twitter, no.
Yeah, well, I mean,
someone's always going to say something.
Twitter is such a cesspool of negativity no matter where you go. So
there's this guy, James Holzhauer, who is amazing at Jeopardy, and I feel like he likes to stir up a little bit of drama, but like nothing crazy.
But he's mostly doing it.
It's mostly in good fun, but I feel like he tries to get people stirred up a little.
But it's never serious. Like, he and Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter and like some of these other top trivia people, they'll have like kind of goofy fake feuds on Twitter, which is always a lot of fun.
Right.
But like, they'll just kind of insult each other, but it's clearly in good fun. Like they all know each other and they're all friends. They're insufferable trivia fans. I mean, yes, there are. There's not a lot of them, but if you fall down into Jeopardy Twitter far enough, you will find people, just bitching about
whatever.
Yeah, right. Sorry, I'm not supposed to curse on this podcast, but whatever.
Oh no, you're good. It's fine.
You'll find people, yelling about, the questions aren't as hard as they used to be, and they're, pandering to, normies who haven't spent their lives reading encyclopedias. Like, you do see some of this, but not a lot of it. Mostly when you get comments like that, people are just like, shut up.
Yeah.
Like, just enjoy the game. Shut up. So
yeah,
I'd say it's much more positive than negative among trivia fans. There's some of that negativity, but not a lot.
That's awesome. That's great. It's so good, like, to have a community of people that are just, like, having fun learning things. That's beautiful to me. That's great.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, it is.
So in terms of, like, the culture of, like, trivia, is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
I don't know. I'm trying to think.
I guess one thing that stands out to me that we haven't talked about yet is just, like, the kind of the wide breadth of opportunities to do this kind of thing, like, there, and how different they are. So, like you said, pub trivia is something that a lot of people do, and pub trivia tends to feel very different than, like, a Jeopardy type game show, right? Pub trivia is often very pop culture oriented. You don't get as much history and science and that kind of stuff, whereas then, like, the high school competitions tend to be very, very academically oriented with only a handful of pop culture questions in any given game. So I think there's different spaces where people with different strengths can find their niche and excel.
Right. Like, I think they had, like, a Jeopardy sports.
They did have that for a couple years.
Where it was just sports trivia. So
that's
I don't know.
I
find that cool when people just know a ton about one topic, whereas in our community, most of us are trying to know a little bit less about every topic.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I think that's kind of a cool feature of this whole community, is that there are spaces for people with different kinds of skills and different knowledge bases.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't think I would be any good at the sciencey questions at all. Like, pop culture is kind of more my speed, but I consider myself still to be a young person. But it's scary when you go to a pop quiz and they talk about, like, a music person that I've never heard of. And I'm like, who are they? Like, I don't...
See, I'm in my mid-30s. That happens more every day.
Yes. I mean, I'm only 25, but I still feel that. I'm like, where are the killers? Like, where is My Chemical Romance? Like,
yeah,
this
right.
is music to me. It's so weird. It's like, who is Billie Eilish? I mean, I know who she is, but I couldn't name any of her songs.
No, me neither. I don't think I could even identify her. Like, I kind of know what she looks like, but maybe she also just sort of looks like how Lorde looks. So, like, they're both just kind of like youngish white girls who can sing.
Yes.
But, like, the online trivia league we're in, like, he's so good at covering everything that there was, like, a question about Olivia Rodrigo's song, driver's license,
right, yeah.
and we had no clue.
I had never heard of this before.
Now we know. So it's cool because that trivia league really covers everything and reminds you that you have to know everything.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fascinating as well. Because I think that I think that's the thing with, like, the algorithm or whatever, like on Twitter or like YouTube. Like, it only recommends the things that you are likely to watch or whatever in the first place.
Right.
So, like, I get into a sort of, like, I mean, my fandom is Kingdom Hearts, so, like, my Twitter is, like, pretty much exclusively Square Enix related.
Sure, yeah.
And it's like, I don't know what's going on in, like, any other community most of the time. It's like, oh, did you hear about the big Sonic controversy? No. It's just
the great Sonic controversy of 2020.
Oh, yeah, I've got a friend who's a big Sonic fan, and he's like, yeah, there's, like, a Sonic thing that happens every week, and I'm like, okay. But it's like, why would I know about that?
Right.
Yeah, because I cultivate my timeline a lot, so I guess, like, social media is probably not the best place to learn trivia things. You probably need to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like you said, a lot of it is about following the news, because some trivia is going to be more, like, current events oriented, and a lot of it is just...
And the pop culture stuff, too, is also following the news, because you have to know the latest albums that came out and all that.
Exactly. So. And then, just reading stuff and watching game shows. That's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah.
If you want to get good at trivia, just play trivia and watch trivia. That's how you get better at it.
listen to podcasts about trivia.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Oh, yes. Do you have any trivia podcasts you can recommend?
Other than ours.
Yes, of course.
Other than ours.
Absolutely.
We really like Ken Jennings' podcast called Omnibus, and it's not, it's called Omnibus. It's not specifically trivia like ours is, questions, but they talk about weird things that somehow seem to come up.
Yeah, they just talk about like weird stories that are not well known, but they do come up with some frequency on game shows. Misinformation is good. If you're looking for like a more female oriented, like
it's like
MISS space information. That
People
sort
like
of
that
relates
one,
back to what we were talking about trying to improve representation. They're really good about that.
Oh, that's cool.
What else? Beat My Guest is good.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that come to mind off the top of my head, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's a fair amount. Like if you go on Twitter, there's a bunch.
Yeah.
But I like ours that it has the questions and then also like more information, because a lot of them are either just trivia questions, like a game show, or just story. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that format, actually. I think it's fun because sometimes like you're watching something, it's like, oh, that's really interesting, and then they just move on to the next thing, and you're like, oh, I would like to know more about that thing. Yeah, it's really good. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm gonna have to.
And I've not found any other podcasts that use that format. I'm sure there must be others, but I've tried to look for others like that, and I cannot find any.
Yeah, so I guess if you listen to a combination, you can get both.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you're aware of No Such Thing as a Fish. Is a really good podcast. It's not like trivia questions, but basically what they do is there's 4 co-hosts, and they just like every week they just find like a random fact, and then they like present it, and then they just talk about it.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I've not heard about that.
It's really good. I recommend it. It's super interesting. And it's just like weird, wacky stuff most of the time.
Oh, another good one I just thought of is Drinkipedia. They each week, so there's 3 hosts on that, and each week one of them just like presents a topic, sort of like what we do after our questions, except they're all drinking at the time, which is good fun.
Which we only do occasionally.
Right.
Awesome. That sounds great. That sounds awesome. I'm going to have to check out some of those. Well, great. Is there anything else you would like to chat about? We are coming up on time.
I don't think so.
No, I think we've covered it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, this has been a joy and a pleasure to learn about trivia. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Of course. Is there anything else you'd like to plug at all where people can find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find us pretty much everywhere at Quiz and Hers.
Yep. QUIZANDHERS.
Yep.
It's a devilishly clever pun that Hallie came up with. Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, we're at Quiz and Hers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And also on
all podcast platforms.
Yeah, whatever your preferred podcast app is, you can find us there as well.
Yeah. But trivia is great. We love it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Justin and Hallie, for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. Anytime.
We'll have to come back and talk football.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's go. Beautiful. All right. Excellent. So that was Justin and Hallie. I really enjoyed hearing their perspective from a fandom that values facts over opinions. It was so fascinating to hear how they came up with good questions, and if you're smart enough, how you can figure out the answer. My name is Karis. You can follow Journey into Fandom on Twitter at J_into_fandom, and I am at Carisonford on Twitter. That is CARYSSONFORD. Please also join the official Discord for all my podcasts, Kingdom Minds, Retrospective, and Journey into Fandom. Thank you for listening. Bye.